When you have to shoot, don't talk.
All right. Another Trap House podcast coming at you. Thanks for tuning in. It's been a minute since we put a new episode out, which is fine. We've just been trying to line up some good content, and we were able to do that. We just got back from Virginia at the Fur Taker National Convention, and while we were there, we sat down with several different individuals and talked about trapping. So keep your eyes peeled online, and we'll release them as needed. But for today's episode, I'm going to go ahead and get this out there. John Daniel is our guest, and we want to release this one first because there's still time to vote. He is running for the NTA president's position, and so like I said, hopefully you like what he has to say in this podcast and kind of his views on things and where he's kind of going. To me, he seems like a great fit. Super nice guy, down to earth, very understanding, and he's been there. So this isn't his first time, working behind the scenes. So, and you'll hear all that in the podcast, of course. But heck of a guy. I'm glad he sat down with us. But before we jump into that, I got to give a big shout out to our sponsors. J3 Outdoors, the maker of the Hags Bracket and Springs Clip. Also, Jeff's got a couple new products there. He's got a tail hook for the guys that like to skin their muskrats by hanging them. And also, he's got a multi-locking system for rigging up drowning systems. And we're actually able to sit with Jeff for a podcast as well, which we'll release at a different date. But he goes through all that stuff, and plus, stories from the trap line and that sort of thing. So that should be a good one, too. These just seem to get better, in my opinion, as time goes on. We're getting more loose on the microphone, and, it takes time to get the kinks worked out, and I'm getting more comfortable with it a little bit, and Charlie is, and it's just turning out to be really good. Great feedback in Virginia, a lot. That was the first rendezvous or convention that we've been to since the release of the podcast, and the feedback was great, so it just gets us fired up to do more. But one last sponsor, of course, I gotta mention, is Hoosier Trapper Supply. We got a new website, well, somewhat new. We've reworked it. It's way easier to maneuver and get through the site and purchase things, to find product and that sort of thing. It's real user friendly, and I think Charlie's really pleased with it. I think it looks pretty slick. So make sure, if you haven't been on, jump on there and check that out, especially with the seasons right around the corner. It will be here before you know it. We'll be adding products and changing things there as well. So take a look at HoosierTrapperSupply.com when you get a chance. And I think that's all I wanted to say. I guess I could go ahead and tell you who else we spoke with. I mentioned Jeff Haggerty, of course, and then John on this one. We got a couple big heavy hitters that well-known people in the industry. Tom Miranda agreed to sit down with us, so that was great. Ron Leggett and Robert Colonna, they were on. Great guys, two peas in a pod right there. Heck of a lot of knowledge between those two, and amount of time and experience on the trap line. So we sat with them for a little bit. Then we got with Mark Steck for a podcast. We've known Mark a long time. He's a sponsor of Hoosier Trapper Outdoors as well, and we've been out and ran snares with him previous years. And a heck of a guy too. I mean, everyone's been good so far in my opinion, but that could just be a biased opinion. But if you're talking trapping, you really can't go wrong if you ask me. But all right, I'm gonna quit babbling. We're gonna get out and tune in and listen to our little convo with John. Thanks for listening. All right, we're here at the Fur Takers National Convention here in Virginia, and we got a special guest with us today, John Daniels. He's with the NTA, and of course Charlie's here as always. How you
Hello,
doing,
everyone. I'm good. Excited to be here.
And
I guess we need to make a correction. It's John Daniel, no S.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's probably a common.
It is. There's been more of me than there really is a lot of times.
Probably feel like there's not enough of you to go around at times, I'm sure. So,
but yeah, we're just hanging out in the parking lot, talking about the future position that's available. Voting's going on now to become the next president, and John's running for that. We've got a couple of weeks left, so if you guys haven't sent your ballot in yet, and you're so inclined to, I would appreciate that and appreciate your support. Yeah. Can you back up and tell us kind of the history of it all, where you got started in all this?
Well, it's trapping has just been in my blood. I didn't come from a trapping background, but when I was 13 and old enough to go on my own, I bought me some traps and started trapping. Learned by trial and error and reading a lot of E.J. Daly's books and his handwritten illustrations, and took them out in the woods and put them to practice, and just learned over the years. I didn't even know that Tennessee had a trapping organization for many years. My oldest daughter will be 33 the first day of July, and when she was about 5 years old, I had to have some parts for my tractor and went up to Athens, Tennessee, and to buy some parts, and there was a flyer there that they were having a trapping association meeting down the road. So I called my wife, and we just stayed up there for the meeting, and I've kind of been involved ever since. Didn't know anything about the NTA or FTA. A friend of mine was the president of a organization in Tennessee and asked me to go help him present a bid for the second Southeastern, I believe, that was held. And I went down there and I met Mr. Jim Buell, who was the president at the time, and we talked for many hours, and he encouraged me to get involved with the NTA, and I took my family and went to my first convention in Columbia, Missouri later that spring, and crashed the president's reception. Didn't know I wasn't supposed to be there without an invitation, but I showed up anyway.
So they asked you to leave?
No, they were gracious about it and didn't embarrass us. And Tom Krause and his wife actually sat down at the table with us and kept us company that night since we didn't know anybody there.
Okay.
And we went from there.
Yeah. Well, it's either good or bad or indifferent or whatever, but it seems like if you volunteer some time or get involved, then you're probably there for life. With these organizations.
It kind of seems that way, doesn't it? If you're willing to work, there's always a job.
Yeah. I'd mentioned it's nice that the FTA and the NTA has a good relationship, and I think we've got a bright future for the two organizations working together.
I agree with you. I think the sky's the limit as to what we can do working together, and I'm real encouraged with the direction we're going.
Mm-hmm. It's because like I said, I remember the day when things were a little tepid or cool between the two of the organizations. So back in the 70s and early 80s, but that's that's old history, and I'm glad that's over. So we don't need any of that kind of stuff. So, but both NTA, important organization, that they've got a big convention coming up in Springfield. We always look forward to going to the national conventions, both of them, but looking forward to going to the NTA. And it's close this year. I mean, it's only like 3 weeks from this one, so they're
right
closer in proximity to in dates than they normally are.
Yeah,
but
I'm actually looking forward to going back out there to Missouri. As I said earlier, my very first convention was in Missouri, and hopefully, if the election goes the way I want it to go, it seems kind of fitting that I could win that election in the state where I went to my first NTA convention.
So what? Yeah, that would be that'd be cool. So what year was that then on the first one?
I believe that was, if I'm by memory, it was either 2004 or 5. Could have been 2003.
Okay, I'm trying to remember. I was at that one. I don't think I had a booth set up, but I was at that one.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing. We got there in that morning, which is not typical for that part of the country, but it was cold and spitting a little snow that morning out there, and we had a hotel room reserved, and the weather felt so great. We went to Home Depot and bought a leaf tarp, some rope, and some dog-eared fencing, and I made a tent, and my kids were all really little, and we ended up camping just because the weather was so nice.
Yeah, which is probably refreshing coming from Tennessee.
Yeah, it definitely was. We let the heat and humidity and got out there, and it had that little cool front come through, and it was really nice.
And if my memory serves me correctly, the next time it was in Columbia, Missouri, it was like 100 degrees.
The next time it was sweltering hot. I attended that convention in Skype that year.
Okay.
For our board meetings and our EC meetings, my son had to have brain surgery.
Oh, okay.
The week before, and I didn't feel comfortable leaving him at home, and so my colleague and friend Dave Shuttleworth took his laptop and we Skyped it so I could attend the convention or the meetings out there that year.
Okay. It was miserably hot, and that it was that the dealer building was that big. It was a big indoor arena, and I remember we kept blowing all the breakers because everybody had fans going, and it was. But we got through it. It was still fun. We still had a good time, but yeah, I remember that one. So yeah, looking forward to going back to Missouri. So how'd you get started? You got started trapping at an early age, and
I did, and I bought a half a dozen number one long spring traps. At that time, I think they were only like $12.50 a dozen or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I bought those, and I bought a half dozen 110 body grippers, and I'd read about them in the Trapper back then. It wasn't Trapper Predator Crawler; it was the Trapper,
right.
And I read about them and bought some of them. But my image of a trapper was Jeremiah Johnson holding up that long spring trap, sitting in that creek, and by God, I was going to be a mountain man, So I wanted my long spring trap,
right?
And those 110s came in. And I looked at those things. They looked like something from Space Age. That didn't look like a trap, and I was embarrassed to set them. And so I left them in the box for the first season. In the second season, I was trapping a little creek, and there was plenty of muskrats on it, and I started setting them in some little runs. And before you knew it, I was making more money catching rats than my dad was driving a truck.
Mm-hmm.
I decided those little odd-looking things were pretty good traps.
Yeah.
That's great.
So that's kind of where I got my start, and then I went into business when I was 19 and got married when I was 21. So I trapped some during my early 20s, but not a lot. It kind of had to go to the back burner, and then when I got into my early 30s was when I saw that sign, and my son, he was old enough that we had actually started trapping again harder the season before, and I saw the sign out there for the convention or the meeting up there, and I've been involved ever since and haven't looked back. It's been an enjoyable time.
Yeah.
It's
I think me personally, and for most of us, I'm sure you included, looking back on those early years, it's some of the best memories of your life.
Yeah.
And it's that, I'll agree, it's that mystique of the mountain men and the all of that probably has drawn us a lot of us in, on this trapping becoming a lifestyle and something that you just can't get over. It's just in your blood, and it's here to stay.
If I had when I was 13 and started, I would have never dreamed. I used to read about the national conventions in the magazine. Honestly, I was a poor kid, so I never thought I'd ever be able to go to one.
Mm-hmm.
And it all seemed more out of reach and more in my imagination and wishing than actual something that would be reality. And if you'd have told me back then all the opportunities I would have had because I wanted to trap when I was 13, I wouldn't have believed you. It's just it's opened up a whole amazing world to me, and I have a lot of good friends across the country out of it, and I owe a lot to trapping, and I want to give a lot back to it for what I owe it.
Now, are you primarily a water trapper, a land trapper, or both? Or
I live along the Tennessee River, and I got started trapping those creeks when I was a kid, so I'm predominantly a water trapper.
Okay.
I do trap bobcats and coyotes and things, but I mostly do that when the opportunity arises.
Okay.
More than
I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember back in the day that Tennessee wouldn't allow a trap on land. It had to be down like in a den or
12
something.
12 inches inside a hole or den.
Yeah.
And that was the only way you could usually trap sort of on land, period. And then we were able to start using them with a padded jaw.
Right, in a typical set.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that was in place for 30-something years.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was the president of the Tennessee Fur Harvesters, me and my vice president, Clarence Dyes, worked on that, and we were able to get that. First off, we had to take trapping out of the hands of legislation and put it in the hands of the TWRA, and we were successful in doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were able to get the rubber jaw restrictions moved by using the BMP studies to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been about 3 years now that we've been able to use laminated jaw. Basically, the catch is the trap has to be 9 inches or less at the widest point and has to have a 1/4 inch thick jaw from top to bottom.
Okay, with an offset.
It doesn't have to be offset.
Oh, really? Okay.
Just top to bottom.
Okay. Well, that's a significant change from how it was at one time.
Definitely.
And I'm assuming it was probably houndsmen, dog hunters that originally were on the push for that.
There was a time that the fox hunters had a lot of political pull and had political people in the right places.
Mm-hmm.
That started it, and then when we had the fur boom in the 70s, houndsmen were really pushing
Sure.
to keep the traps out of their dogs' way.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting when you hear there are certain states out there that have definitely had that. It wasn't the animal rights agenda or anything. It was actually the hounds guys, the dog hunters working against us. So are they as strong in your state as they were at that time? Now
they are not as strong as they were, but education has helped with that a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
Our Tennessee Association does a lot of educational booths across the state every year, several of them, and we offer free trapper training camps. It's open to anybody. I started the first one at the Hiawassee Refuge 15 years ago now. We do a 3-day camp, live trap line, and we've dispelled a lot of myths, and I think that has really helped improve us
right
on those types of things. Communication goes a long ways.
Right, and that probably part of that's a little bit of generational change too in some of that really old way of thinking in the 1970s and prior, and then that coupled with just the education. And the Fur Takers developed a video on releasing dogs from traps, geared towards obviously people that hunt or whatever that use dogs. And I think Wisconsin were the original ones that came out with the zip tie to open up a body trap to get, for the individual that wouldn't have a setter or whatever, to get a dog out of a trap. So I couldn't agree more. The education is key to all that.
It's when I'm teaching a class, one of the things that I always say is, we've got one patch of woods and we all have to share it.
Right.
And showing respect for the other sportsmen out there is imperative. We have to do a good job with that. We want to set our traps, but we want to respect their right to use those same woods and streams and what have you to do what they enjoy doing. And the more that we understand that we're trying to do that with each other, the less problems we're going to have.
Right. There's enough resources out there for all of us. We have to just
Definitely.
figure out how to get along,
Definitely.
Together. And there's so many out there working against the all group of consumptive users, outdoorsmen. We can't afford this.
Oh, you're exactly right. It's we are diminishing in numbers in all types of consumptive uses, and if we're going to survive, if we're going to preserve it for the future generations, which I think is one of the most important things that we have tasked in front of us, because I want my grandkids that are here with me this weekend, I want their grandkids to be able to do this and
Right.
experience what we're doing. We're going to have to stick together. We're going to have to build working relationships that keep us enough in the public light that the public understands that we have a place.
Right. Yeah, and that's a difficult task.
Yeah, that's a challenge.
But
for sure.
it's very important, and it needs to be done.
It is.
We probably need to start with our peers, outdoor consumptive peers.
Sure.
But it's funny too. We have. I mean, we'll set up at a deer expo. The Indianapolis is a big deer expo. It's with the Indianapolis Boat Sport and Travel Show, and it's interesting and shows lack of education on their part. People that are consumptive users, hunters in particular, that don't. At minimum, they don't understand what we're doing, and they may have not particularly positive feelings toward strappers. And those guys right there. Normally, with some education and some discussion, you can say, okay, and I think too the idea. One thing that has seemed to have helped is this idea of guys managing their deer and turkey hunting leases or ground to make their hunting better, which has probably helped trapping some too. But
it's definitely helped. Some of the new reality shows have helped some to a degree, but the more organized other groups like turkey hunters and quail hunters, the more they manage land for their selected species, the more understanding there is that fur bearer management and fur bearer population management is a part of that process, the better it is for us. The more they're educate themselves on the need for that, more positive changes we're going to see in their the way they look at us.
Yeah, I think I guess I hadn't been to a public hearing, and we've talked about this before on the podcast, but I hadn't been to a public hearing for a few years, and I got a dose of it in Indiana when we tried to get a bobcat season a year ago. Just the complete line of crap that we basically heard from the animal rights group. It was kind of the age-old story. You're entitled to your opinion, but you're not entitled to your own set of facts. And that group that was there against that bomb, we're never going to sway them on, or most of them. But that's all those other people out there that aren't committed in their opinion or their bias.
And that's it. It's I hate to use waste our time because we should educate as many of as much of the opposition as we can, who will allow us to educate them open-mindedly. But in most situations, we are wasting our time trying to sway their opinion, and what we have to do is educate that 80% that doesn't have an opinion, and because they're the ones that's ultimately going to have the vote and the say in the long run.
Right. Unfortunately, well, it's just the way things are. But that group seems to have this incredibly loud. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. So I mean, it's just they make a lot of noise, and
that's just it. For the most part, it's noise.
Yeah.
They they know how to play on emotions, and they know how to loudly present unfactual statements that plays on emotions, and they gain a lot of ground because of that. It's a whole lot easier to be on the side that doesn't have to prove. Accusations carry a lot of weight, and in our situation, we have to prove our case.
Right. It's and that's a good point. It's really easy to jump on an emotional bandwagon. It's not as easy to back up and say, do some homework, do some research, and then form an opinion based on what that's way more difficult, and it's not as exciting because there's a certain group or idea that they want to jump on this cause. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. That and that's probably a lot of this is human nature too. But
it is, and we're in a generation now that's pretty much a couple of generations removed from the agriculture base that founded our nation.
Right.
We've done such a good job producing food in this country that few people have to produce food. So there's very few people who understand agriculture, understand outdoors, understand the facts of life when you get right down to it. There's death every day. There's no way around that, whether it's through cars, attrition, traps. There's too many things out there, and that's just the way the facts of life are. And too many times, our new generations are insulated from that fact so much that they don't understand that a part of managing the world we live in comes down to harvesting surplus, keeping healthy populations, so that everything works the way it should.
Right. There's no emotional or attachment, or even in most cases a realization that cellophane wrapped meat that you bought at the store was alive a few days before.
Exactly.
There's a huge disconnect with that, and we've got an uphill battle. So
we do.
I don't want to get everybody doubted out and depressed, because I on one hand it's like because of current circumstances with the fur industry, we're probably at a low point. But the guys that are left for now, we're trappers. This is it, but it's not going to get.
Yep.
So I'm excited about a lot of things, but then we've got this hanging over us in a way. So,
right.
And that's why we got to be due diligent about being involved in organizations.
Yeah, and it's not all gloom and doom. It really
isn't. It isn't.
It's but with that being said, we can't walk through the world oblivious to the facts that if we don't stay on top of things, we won't have it in a few years.
Right. So with what you can talk about at this point, and I realize we're jumping to conclusions, but so you see big changes for the NTA? And you could just pass on that if you want to. We can edit this out, but
big changes scare people.
Yeah.
Positive changes in calculated movements is a lot more successful in the long run than big changes.
Right. And I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a contractor is what I do for a living. I've done that since I was 19 years old, and when I walk into my job each day, I'm not worried about the things that are done right, because those things are making me money.
Mm-hmm.
They're taking care of themselves. So I look for the things that are not making me money, that are not making my job successful, and that's kind of my mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So if elected, that's probably the way I'll run the NTA is I will be my own biggest critic, and I will look for the things that need to be improved, whatever they are. The NTA has come a long ways, especially in the last 6 years or so, 7 years. Chris McAllister, I feel, has done a good job helping make us solvent. we're sitting on a sound financial ground, better than we have in many years. We've got a good attorney who's a trapper. We've got a lot of positive things. We've got an office staff that is ran by a lady that usually has the answers to the questions before I ever ask one. And that's a really positive thing. It's almost like she reads. I call in weekly for things, and it's almost like she reads my mind.
She does what
and
you want.
does what I want, and there it is when I call, and that's a good thing. You know, we've got good contractors out there that are working for us, and we've got a lot of positive, good things going our way. We've got this new rekindled relationship going with FTA that needs to be fostered and brought to a whole new level. So there's a lot of good things that's already happening, and my motto is always move forward, always improve.
Yeah.
So that's the way I'm going to look at it. I don't want to go in and try to do something earth shattering, because earth shattering scares people.
Right.
I want to be positive. I want to leave it better than I found it. And when my terms are up and I'm no longer there, I want to look back and see that I've accomplished something in a positive way.
Yeah, that's
all you can ask for.
Yeah, I think that is a good way to put that too. Is the phrase of the question probably wasn't, but yeah, you're right. Big changes do make people nervous. So yeah, I think that's a good perspective. So, but
on a side note, outside of that, if we scale it back a little bit and be less serious, we and Charlie are thinking about coming to Tennessee. I mentioned to you to trap.
Right.
Where, do you know where roughly that was? It was closer to the Alabama line, wasn't it?
It was on the I want to say central part of the state, but on the southern line, and I may be wrong.
So
on
down
that.
around Pulaski or Columbia, somewhere down there.
I guess I'm not even. I can't even say.
We don't even know.
So I wasn't even doing my homework good enough last year. But we intended to go a year ago, and because of the weather and other obligations that we had to postpone it to this year. It's from a fellow that was a customer, and he buys our deer hunting center or whatever, and he can't buy it anymore because he can't use deer products in your state, in your home state, except for synthetics. So, but anyways, he so we got all this deer ground leased up, and you guys are welcome to come down. So, anyways, that's our end. So.
Okay.
Well, that ties in too with that the rubber jaws being uplifted. That really opened the door for us to even make it.
You know, Hal Sullivan, he's trapped in Tennessee for a lot of years, and the year that we had those changes made, we were also hosting the NTA Southeastern, and Hal had a booth there, and he came by and made a generous donation to our state association because we saved him money.
Sure.
But getting those laws changed made life easier on him.
Yeah, and it's if you go the further south you go, the less trappers there are generally. Well. It's easier to find places to trap. Fur's worth less. Landowners and leaseholders are willing to have the control done. So, and obviously, if you got to buy a whole new set of equipment, then that's not the most inviting state to go to.
Right.
So that was a real positive.
And it's all been a positive change. We've not had really any negative feedback from landowners or other sportsmen over it, and I think that's a good testament to the fact that we are doing a good job educating in Tennessee, and our trappers, for the most part, you've always got the rogues, and honestly, I don't consider them trappers. I consider them outlaws.
Right.
But our trappers are mindful of things, and we've come a long ways.
Yeah, it's when we do trappers ed classes and we talk to these not necessarily kids, but and adults in some cases, and those are through the state of Indiana. I always say, look, you can be 100% legal, but if you're not thinking about where you're setting your trap and you're going to end up catching someone's dog or even the landowner's dog, then it's never a very good situation.
There's a difference between legal and ethical.
Exactly.
Yep.
And common sense goes so far.
Right. Right. If you're a mile from the house, and you know that happens, then it's explainable and whatever. But in general, you have to be ethical on what you're doing. You know,
I run my trap line. I live about 35 or 40 miles north of Chattanooga, and I grew up in a little town called Hickson, which is a suburb of Chattanooga now. So most of my work's still down there because that's where I got started in business years ago. And so I run my trap line to and from Chattanooga, basically. So a lot of my trap line is around now subdivisions and what have you. Now, I can legally go in there and I can set up those creeks and things along the edges of those subdivisions, but I'm not going to go in there and set up something that I'm going to catch their pets.
Right.
I mean, what good is that doing me? You just mentioned a minute ago we're in a down fur market. Why would I risk ending trapping for a $2 coon?
Right.
Why would I do that?
Right.
You know, and people just need to be considerate of that. You know, they need to think about those kinds of
Well,
things.
not to mention you're just wasting your own time. You got to sit there, remake a set, let the dog out or whatever it is. You're just wasting a bunch of time anyway.
And it's kind of it's a no-win. It's kind of a black eye on trapping. So this guy has no opinion on trapping. He's one of those, and you catch his dog, and so his opinion has probably gone to the negative side. So
exactly. We had an anti-bill this past year in Tennessee, the first one we've had since I've been involved in trapping, and it was over a dog that a fellow legally was set, but it was too close to a subdivision. I'll just be honest with you. It was probably not the best choice on his part.
Mm-hmm.
And our association, myself and other members, had to spend a whole lot of our time fighting that problem.
Mm-hmm.
And a little forethought could have
avoided all of that. Yeah. It's and that there again, education, and there's some trappers that are always going to, screw up or whatever. The rogue trappers that you mentioned, a lot of times when you're listening to the animal rights antis, whatever you want to call them, they're mentioning a lot of stuff that's already illegal. We can't, they'll bring up animals sitting in traps for days, traps with teeth, all this.
Yeah.
Things are mentioned, and those are all illegal anyways.
Mm-hmm.
We've done a lot of pretty good housekeeping ourselves, and the idea that we've always got this feud, just like there in any area of activity, it doesn't matter what it is. There's going to be somebody that's not going to do things right or ethically or whatever.
Right.
So
I was 2008 Director of the Year for the NTA, and that came about because of an illegal dog caught down across from Chattanooga, and just so happened the lady whose dog got caught was a relative of the people who own the Chattanooga Free Press.
Oh, that was convenient.
The first article on it stated the dog had been decapitated, and it was caught in a 220 or a 330. It's a long time ago now. I don't remember which. And the newspaper, in an effort to be fair, reached out to trappers and wanted a rebuttal, wanted our side told. And one of the people that was contacted asked them to contact me, and I'd never done an interview or anything like that before, and I was afraid to do something that would be negative.
Right.
So I reached out to then. It was Craig Kotz was the president of the NTA, and he put me in touch with our attorney, Gary Lustico, and Gary coached me on the proper way to do that interview. And so I went and set a couple of 330s. They sent the reporter out there, and a young lady from Colorado came to take the pictures. And it was a cold day, and I'd caught a beaver, and I waded out in that creek with my waders on to take the beaver out of the trap, and I hear the splash, splash, and here she comes in her tennis shoes, and it was a cold day. And she came out in there with me and took pictures of me taking that beaver out of the trap, and I explained to them that was the same type of trap that dog was caught in, and how that, that we trapped fur. We wanted the fur there. We didn't want it cut in half. And
Right.
we were not going to use something that would do that.
Right.
And it turned out pretty good for us.
Good. She actually probably was she kind of into the whole thing too, or?
Yeah, she seemed to be. She seemed to be really enjoyed it. She got really excited when we caught a beaver out there. And,
Definitely interested for sure. Then
yeah,
couple things there. One is you do have to be very careful when you talk to the public or the press on what you say, because they'll twist it or misconstrue it, or we keep bring up this bobcat hearing. We had a number of trappers that got up and spoke, and there was just a handful that it would have been better they didn't get up and speak. And so it is important what you say.
And when we fought that anti-issue this year, we have a friend in the TWRA who keeps us up to date on things that's going on. And under his advisement, he asked us to handpick 10 people to respond.
Yeah.
Because the wrong response does way more damage than 50 good responses does.
Right.
We want them to see our side of an issue. We want them to hear what we have to say. We don't want the first 2 words out of our mouth to offend them to the point that they hear none of the rest of the words we say.
Exactly.
So while sometimes you may want to say more, you have to have restraint, and you have to do it the right way. We all have emotions. We all have feelings, including the other side, and we don't want to affect their feelings and their emotions to the point that what we say is not effective to them.
Right. Where exactly, where it's just turned around and it's working against us. So, and we don't want to work against ourselves.
Right.
So, going back to the reporter, it's funny, or not funny. It's cool if people are exposed to this stuff on a firsthand. In other words, they get to go.
They can ask the questions that they might not, get.
Yeah, they got firsthand experience with this stuff. Most people enjoy it. Most people like it.
That's exactly why I started the Hiwassee Trapper Training Camp 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Most of the people that come to that camp have never set a trap in their life, and most of them probably won't after they leave. But we want to make sure they leave with a good impression of what we do. We want to make sure they understand that we're ethical sportsmen. We care about our harvest. We give respect to the animals that we catch, and after we catch them, we don't throw them in a ditch. We skin them, we put them up, and we make a useful product out of them.
Right.
And if we can leave them with that, if those people who attend that are part of that 80% who have no opinion. They're voters, and if we can leave them with that good impression, then it's worth it. We've
had people I've helped instruct at the FTA Trappers College the past 6 or 7 years now, and we get a lot of agency people that don't have a background in this, and some that are probably at minimum on the fence when they show up. And it's interesting to see how that works itself out through the week when they see what all is involved and the care the trappers have, and just the excitement of checking traps in the morning. So it all is an important role in what we do.
My son and I attended Trappers College probably 08 or 09, somewhere right in there. And I tell you, I really enjoyed it. I hope to come back someday. I always wanted to take Gary Jepson's class.
Yeah.
I assume Gary's still teaching.
He is. He is still up there, yeah.
I'd like to go back before he hangs it up and is retired from it. I would really like to take his class.
Gary heads up the advanced class, the class 5, and it's usually of the college normally has around, they limit it to 60 students for the week, and usually there's 61, 62 max. go slightly over or whatever. But Gary's is typically the smaller class of the 5 classes.
Right.
You know, so,
By the survey, I was actually supposed to be in Gary's class when I went, but I wanted to know Pete Askins and learn Pete Askins.
okay.
And I specifically asked to go in Pete's class. 2 reasons. One, his assistant used to be Red Edgman, which was a Tennessee guy,
Mm-hmm.
and I always had a lot of respect for Red. And the other is Pete had such a mechanical understanding and did so much for trapping. I really had a lot of respect and admiration for Pete and wanted to get a little time with Pete, and I'm glad I was able to do that.
Yeah.
And still like to go back and do that with Gary.
Yeah. It was to be honest, every year that I I'm getting ready to go up there to do that, and of course we're in the trapping supply business, and we do taxidermy as well. So that going into that time, we're always busy, but going into that time of year, it's even busier. So I'm always thinking, oh my gosh, to be gone for how we're going to fit it in, how to be gone for a week. It's stressful to go and whatever. And then I go up there and always have such a good week and meet a lot of interesting people and feel like you're doing a very good service to the trapping industry, family, whatever you want to call it. You know, I'm hooked on going back the following year. So I can't say enough good things about the Trappers College. You know, so but
yeah, I've been lucky myself. Speaking of Gary Jepson, they've had me go up there and do photos for whatever promotion or
the media guy.
I'm the media guy. So I got to jump around to all the classes. And that first year I went, they dropped me off with I spent a lot of time in Gary's group, so I was picking up quite a bit of stuff. So it was kind of neat. It's like it was a good opportunity, and going back again this year. So
yeah, they do that little thing. I assume they still do it where one evening all the instructors do like a little demo.
Where you do the rotate. Yeah, they call that round robin. Yeah.
Yeah. And the year I was there, Gary had a garbage can out there that he was making a Bobcat set in. And
I think he still does that. Does he, Justin?
the garbage can?
Or a big tunnel thing, or does he do that still?
I haven't seen that
he had
one.
like just a 50-gallon garbage can that you buy at the dollar store, you know, and he'd put dirt and mulch in the bottom of it, and he actually I think he was putting a 330 in it. For cats.
For a Bobcat Cubby type.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
he doesn't do that. See, I'm at a disadvantage, too, because I'm with the Group 1, and so I don't get around to see what the other ones are doing. So I haven't had full advantage of going to attending the other classes, per se. But we get, with Group 1, we get the beginners, and we get a lot of the agency people that are sent there. So that's an interesting.
That's a big group
we
too.
Went. That was Ron Leggett's class. My son was in Ron's class.
Okay. And presently, the group that I have, Jerry Joe Barnett was in that group. I don't remember Jerry Joe or not.
Yeah, I know Jerry Joe.
And then he retired from it, and then E.J. Kelly moved up as the lead, and then myself and Rick Shadle help with that group. So,
one of our Tennessee guys and Jerry Joe, the year I went, taught together. Doug McKenzie and Jerry Joe were working together on a class. Then
Doug McKenzie, the fishing crazy guy.
Yeah. He furnishes us a lot of fish for our events.
I would imagine. Every time I see him on Facebook, he's fishing. So
can't blame him.
He's a good guy. Since I've known Doug, I've always liked him. He's a good.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
He's a good guy. Retired.
He's enjoying life.
Yeah, retired game warden. So yeah.
Yeah, he was actually conservation officer of the year one year for Tennessee.
Oh, really? That's pretty significant.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that. I'll bring it up to him when I see him here later today. I saw him earlier walking around.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So, John, you got anything you want to add to?
Just vote your conscience, guys. If you haven't voted yet, if you haven't voted, vote. Whichever way you vote, I feel like I do have a lot to offer. I guarantee you won't find anybody that'll work any harder at it than I will. I'm a hands-on type of a person. I will know it from front to back, and I will do the best job I can, and leave you with a positive result when my time's up. I appreciate you guys giving us the opportunity to talk today about it a little bit, and we'll see you guys in Missouri in a few weeks.
We are looking forward to it, and I might add that we're sometimes kind of harder on ourselves than we should be. So we all need to support these organizations. So
I agree.
Very important, John. We really appreciate
Thank you.
you talking
Thank
to
you.
us. And looking forward to Springfield.